They expected fireworks. What they got was a fault line. And the crack began with just one question. Where's your mom from? Africa. The stage in Austin glowed under soft golden lights, casting halos around the 8 chairs arranged in a neat row. Each seat was taken by a rising star, young, articulate, media-trained future policymakers. The event was billed as tomorrow's leaders, today's choices, and the energy in the room was the kind you'd expect. Polished, professional, polite, the crowd rustled with programs and whispered greetings. Phones were tucked away. Everyone was here for the photo ops and sound bites, the usual applause-lined democracy. But not Karoline Leavitt. She hadn't come for policy. She came for attention. Karoline was the youngest panelist on stage, a conservative commentator whose rise had been fueled by viral confrontation. She knew how to spark outrage, how to phrase a sentence just sharp enough to trend. And tonight, she had chosen her mark carefully. Jasmine Crockett, the only black woman on stage. A former public defender turned congresswoman, known for her unwavering calm, her deliberate tone, and the kind of truth that didn't need to shout, to sting. Jasmine had walked into the auditorium not to win, but to represent. And that, Karoline believed, was exactly the kind of target ripe for performance. The debate was rolling on, question after question passing like tennis balls in slow motion. The moderator asked about youth opportunity, infrastructure, AI and education. Then Karoline leaned forward. She tilted her head slightly and smiled, the kind of smile that's all porcelain and poison. So, Jasmine, she said, her voice syrupy, sweet. Where's your mom from? Africa. The words dropped like a glass shattering on marble. Silence followed. Not a pause, a freeze. An unnatural stillness that sucked the air from the auditorium. Laughter didn't come. Even nervous chuckles died before reaching lips. The moderator blinked, pen suspended midair. A camera operator instinctively zoomed, and Jasmine didn't move. Then, something subtle. A figure in the back row stood up. No one had noticed her before. A woman in a maroon shawl standing slowly, deliberately. Silver-streaked hair, eyes forward, shoulders squared. Not angry, not trembling. Just present, just powerful. Jasmine didn't turn to look. She didn't have to. She already knew. That was her mother. For a moment, the lights felt colder, the air heavier. The silence now had shape and mass and memory. Karoline's smile twitched. She thought she was asking a question. What she'd really done was knock on the door of something older than her ambition, something generational, something that didn't take kindly to being reduced to a punchline. The room expected a comeback. What they got was a reckoning. The room didn't breathe. For a moment, it felt as though time had stepped aside to make space for something heavier, a history that demanded to be acknowledged. Karoline leaned back slightly in her seat, her fingers now fidgeting with the cap of her water bottle. Whatever confidence she had moments ago was slipping through her grip like sand. Jasmine hadn't spoken yet. She didn't rush. She simply adjusted the microphone, glanced toward the audience, not at Karoline, and inhaled. The crowd waited. They didn't know what they were about to hear, but they sensed it wasn't going to be what they'd expected. This wasn't going to be a gotcha moment. There would be no shouting, no table slams, no hashtags screamed into the void. No, this would be surgical and unforgettable. Jasmine's voice broke the silence, not loud, but clear enough to cut. Through the tension like a scalpel through silk. You asked where my mother is from. She let the words settle. 1 second. 2. Not because you wanted to know, but because you wanted to remind me of where you think I don't belong. Karoline blinked. Jasmine continued, her voice steady, controlled like a jazz solo. Measured, elegant, full of lived truth. My mother is from Tuskegee, Alabama. Her words echoed gently through the room. The name alone, Tuskegee, carried weight, The kind of weight that didn't need explaining to those who knew. Those who felt. She was born into a world where her skin meant she couldn't drink from certain fountains, where her brilliance was filtered through ceilings so low they scraped her dreams. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Damn, she isn't from Africa," Jasmine said. "Though if she were, I'd wear that like armor, not shame. But you weren't asking to learn. You were testing me. You wanted to see if I'd smile politely, if I'd laugh it off, if I'd let you make my mother's story the punchline to a bad joke." The moderator still hadn't moved. Neither had the cameras. Even the panelists next to Jasmine had frozen, as if proximity to truth made them too heavy to shift. Jasmine's gaze didn't flinch. She looked past Karoline now, beyond the stage. She looked directly into the lens. "You asked where she's from? She's from night shifts. She's from scrubbed kitchen floors and worn-out textbooks and prayers whispered. Into the dark when we didn't know how we'd keep the lights on." The woman in the maroon shawl was still standing. Her hands were clasped in front of her now, holding nothing and everything. "She's the reason I know the value of silence, but also when to break it." The air in the room had changed. People weren't just listening now. They were leaning in. Phones had been lifted, not for distraction, but to document. Jasmine wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. She was speaking with the force of generations behind her, and the weight of every room where someone tried to shrink her into silence. And in that moment, no one remembered the other 7 panelists' names. Only hers. Karoline came with talking points. Jasmine came with bloodlines. Karoline opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Not the clever quip she'd rehearsed. Not the smirk she'd built her brand on. Just breath, ragged, uneven. She reached for her water bottle again, her 3rd time in a minute, and twisted the cap off like it had personally wronged her. Jasmine didn't watch her. She didn't need to. The room was hers now, and Karoline knew it. Jasmine turned slightly toward the audience, her posture regal, like someone raised in houses too small for their ambition, but too proud to ever crouch. "You see," Jasmine said, "there's a kind of power in silence, but it depends on who is silent and why." She paused, not for effect, just long enough to let the weight of her words settle like dust on every shoulder in the auditorium. "My mother stayed silent when the principal asked her to clean the classroom for extra credit instead of letting her take Algebra 2. She was silent when her nursing supervisor called her gal in front of a patient. She stayed silent because she knew speaking might cost her more than it was worth. She looked back toward the woman in the maroon shawl, her mother, still standing, still not blinking. "But tonight," Jasmine said, her voice lower now, more intimate, "I speak, not just for her, but because of her." A man in the 2nd row wiped his eyes. A young woman near the aisle whispered to her friend, "This is history." Karoline finally found her voice. "Barely. I didn't mean," she began, but her words sounded hollow, flimsy. Jasmine cut in, not with anger, with precision. "I believe you." The room blinked. "I believe you didn't mean for the question to sound cruel," she continued. "That's the most dangerous part, because ignorance dressed up as curiosity still does damage, and intention doesn't erase impact." The silence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't tension. It was reverence. Karoline shifted in her chair like she wanted to melt into it. But the lights were too bright, the eyes too many, the cameras already recording history. Jasmine wasn't done. "You thought you were poking at my roots," she said calmly. "But all you did was water them." She gestured behind her, toward her mother. She stood up not because she was angry, but because you summoned her. Not with respect, but with assumption. And let me tell you something. Now she turned to Karoline. "Just for a second. You don't summon black women. We arrive when it matters, and we stand where history asks us to. A ripple of breath, half gasp, half awe, ran through the auditorium. Jasmine sat back, straight spine, quiet eyes. And in that moment, Karoline Leavitt shrunk into her silence, finally understanding that not all voices are measured in decibels. Some are measured in generations. She walked off the stage hoping to disappear, but the internet had already made her unforgettable. The moment Karoline's heels clacked off that stage, it was like the building exhaled, not in relief, in realization. The silence she left behind didn't fade. It spread, across phones, across timelines, across state lines. Someone in the fifth row already had the clip trimmed and uploaded before she hit the parking lot. Another student had started a Twitter thread titled, "How to End a Racist Dog Whistle in Under 60 Seconds, a masterclass by Jasmine Crockett." By the time Karoline slammed her car door shut, her name was trending, not in triumph, in infamy. She sat there in the driver's seat, hands trembling. Her phone buzzed, texts, missed calls, 3 unread emails with subject lines like, "Urgent, statement," and "We need to talk optics." But all she could see in her mind was Jasmine's face. Calm, controlled, powerful. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't even raised her voice. She'd done something worse. She'd made Karoline irrelevant in her own moment. Back inside, the panel had technically resumed. The moderator cleared his throat, tried to transition to the next topic, education funding. But it was useless. No one cared about policy bullet points now. The room still belonged to Jasmine. Young Latina student raised her hand. "Sorry," she said, "but can we go back for a second? What Jasmine said, that mattered." Another panelist, a former city councilwoman, nodded slowly. "This wasn't on the agenda," she said, "but maybe it should have been." Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't grandstand. She just sat there, straight-backed, composed, like a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she had just done. And that made it all the more powerful. Outside the auditorium, students clustered in tight circles, watching the clip again and again. She destroyed her without even raising her voice. I swear I've never seen a takedown like that. Quiet, deadly. I didn't even know I needed this until I heard it. A white father from suburban Ohio, sitting in his den, watched the clip with his teenage sons. "What do you think she meant by, 'You don't summon black women?'" one of them asked. He paused, and for once, he didn't dodge the hard question. In a dorm room across the country, a young black woman closed her laptop and texted her mom, "I'm applying for the internship. I'm not scared anymore. Love you." Jasmine hadn't just defended herself. She'd drawn a line. And suddenly, people realized they weren't just watching a debate. They were witnessing a shift. One where dignity didn't require shouting. One where presence could be protest. One where silence, when earned, could become legend. Before she ever picked up a mic, Jasmine learned how to hold a room with nothing but her mother's stare. Before the cameras, before the trending hashtags, before Karoline Leavitt ever thought to mock her. There was a living room in South Dallas, and in it, a young Jasmine Crockett watched her mother do something extraordinary, survive with grace. Her mother, Deborah, didn't raise her voice unless it was to sing. She wasn't loud. She was undeniable. Every Sunday after church, while other kids played outside, Jasmine sat cross-legged on the floor, watching her mom iron uniforms for the next shift. Scrubs that carried the scent of hospital bleach and lavender soap. Her mother didn't complain. She told stories. Stories of her childhood in Tuskegee, how she'd marched with her cousins, too young to understand the danger but old enough to know, you keep walking, no matter who shouts. She spoke of the time her school was shut down for desegregation protests, of the time she refused to enter through a restaurant's back door and sat on the curb, hungry but proud, and always she'd end with this line, There is power in not letting people drag you to their level. Jasmine had heard it 100 times. It didn't feel like a lesson back then, just a rhythm, her mother's rhythm. Quiet, repetitive, steady. But on that stage in Austin, it clicked like a code finally decrypted. The woman standing in the back of that auditorium, the one Karoline tried to turn into a punchline, was more than a mother. She was the architect of resilience. When she rose from her seat that night, Jasmine didn't need to turn around to know. She didn't need her mother's words. She needed her presence. That was how Deborah Crockett raised her daughter. Not to react, but to respond. Not to perform, but to represent. Later that evening, as the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Jasmine finally stepped off stage and walked toward the back. They met halfway. No hugs. No dramatic tears. Just a soft nod from Deborah. "You remembered," her mother whispered. Jasmine nodded back. "I always do." What Karoline didn't understand, what most people don't, is that strength like Jasmine's isn't improvised. It's inherited. It's passed down in stories, in silence, in sacrifices, too quiet for headlines, but loud enough to build a legacy. So when Jasmine spoke that night, she wasn't just answering a question, she was echoing generations. The clip was just 2 minutes and 17 seconds, but it cracked open a conversation America had spent decades dodging. By sunrise, the clip had already been viewed 1.3 million times. By lunch, it was dissected on 5 different news panels. By dinner, even the president's press secretary was asked about it. And in every replay, it wasn't Karoline's smirk they paused on. It was Jasmine's voice, her stillness, her mother's silhouette in the background like a shadow of history refusing to fade. Twitter exploded, not just with retweets, with reckonings. This wasn't a debate. This was a masterclass in dignity under fire. Political truths now, every young black girl needs to see this moment, every one of them. Balk, women lead. But for every voice lifted in support, there were others who twisted it, pundits scrambling to call it an overreaction. Think pieces about freedom of speech. A viral op-ed titled, "It was just a question," but Jasmine didn't respond to those, because she didn't have to. The moment was already louder than their commentary. Karoline Leavitt, meanwhile, went silent. Her usual media rounds canceled. Her Instagram wiped clean, no apologies, no explanations, and yet her silence spoke volumes. Not like Jasmine's, which had weight and meaning, but the kind of silence that follows a misstep so severe, words only make it worse. She'd played the crowd, and lost to something she never saw coming. Ancestry, courage, truth. In a college dorm room in Detroit, a girl who'd been doubting her major switched to political science that morning. In a newsroom in Atlanta, a producer fought to keep the clip unedited on air. And in classrooms from Oakland to Queens, teachers rewrote today's lesson plan to begin with. Let's talk about what happened last night. Because sometimes one sentence, delivered without rage, can shake an entire generation awake. And still, through it all, Jasmine didn't chase the spotlight. She sat with her mother at a small diner in East Austin. No cameras, no handlers, just 2 women sharing waffles and quiet pride. "Did I go too far?" Jasmine asked once. Her mother wiped syrup from her hands and replied, "You didn't go anywhere. They finally saw where you've always stood." 1 year later, Jasmine didn't just return to the same stage. She rewrote the reason it even existed. Exactly 12 months after the night that stopped time, the university auditorium looked almost identical. Same deep mahogany stage, same velvet curtains, same row of chairs waiting for speakers to take their places. But this time, there were no 8 panelists, only one podium, only one name on the program, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, keynote speaker. Topic: When Silence Speaks Truth. The audience? 4 times larger, national press, front row, students, packed the balcony, the aisles, the stairways. But before Jasmine spoke, something unexpected happened. The host stepped forward and said, "Tonight, we'd like to welcome a guest who's been part of this journey since the beginning. Please rise for Mrs. Evelyn Crockett." From the back of the room, the same woman in the maroon shawl, this time with streaks of silver braided neatly into her hair, stood again. And this time the room didn't freeze, it rose. Every single person, a standing ovation, not for a line, not for a debate, but for a legacy. Jasmine took the mic. No notes, no teleprompter, just memory and fire. A year ago, this stage held a conversation that was supposed to be about policy. But we were forced to confront something deeper: identity, dignity, and the weight of history we carry silently into every room we enter. She paused. That night wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. She told them about the messages she still received from mothers, from teachers, from young girls who stood up to the Karoline in their own lives. She told them about how silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the moment right before the truth drops like thunder. And she told them one more thing. The woman in the back, she's the reason I didn't break. She's why I could sit in that chair with my spine straight and my voice level. Because dignity is inherited. And you don't insult my mother without hearing from me. When Jasmine finished, she didn't ask for applause. She walked down the steps and hugged her mother. But the applause came anyway, roaring, rising, endless. Because she hadn't just won a debate, she'd won the narrative. And what about Karoline? A year later, she tried to re-emerge. New brand, new tone, more thoughtful. But the internet never forgets, and neither does a generation that learned what truth sounds like. So now let me ask you, when was the last time you saw someone stand on the very ground they were once humiliated and turn it into a stage for change?